Connecticut Representative Rosa DeLauro used her opening statement today during a budget hearing to completely break down why Russell Vought, the co-author of Project 2025, is so wrong to think that Donald Trump should have king-like powers to allocate federal funds as he sees fit.
The Office of Management and Budget is perhaps the most critical agency that most people have never heard of. I know you know this well, Mr. Vought, but that is no excuse to thwart and otherwise ignore the law. In the United States of America, if you disagree with a law, you have every right to urge that that law be changed. You can petition or meet with lawmakers, and you can wage a campaign in the court of public opinion. You can run to become a lawmaker yourself. What disagreement with the law does not confer is license to ignore the law, to flagrantly violate the law, and to act as though you are completely above the law. This administration, instead of being laser-focused on the cost of living crisis, it is actually making that cost of living crisis worse. And it has put billionaires in charge of the government and has filled the ranks of civil servants with political allies. For the sake of eliminating accountability and cutting taxes for billionaires, this administration is unlawfully impounding or stealing funds and dismantling agencies, depriving the American people of the programs and services which Congress has created, authorized, and appropriated funds for. You posit yourself a defender of everyday Americans and a champion for restoring an imagined version of America you consider morally and virtuously superior to the country we actually live in. I do not believe your actions, which are inflicting direct harm on the people you claim to support, is in any way reflective of righteous values or of America's constitutional tradition. You support autocracy, not restrained or limited government. You have shown nothing but utter disregard and disrespect for this committee, for Congress as a whole, and for the laws that we have enacted. When the president named you to retake this position, he said that you would, quote, return self-governance to the people, end quote. Yet, you have demonstrated contempt for American taxpayers by gleefully ignoring lawful requirements to provide them and their elected representatives in Congress the most basic information as to how their tax dollars are being spent. During your current tenure, the president has yet to submit a full budget. When it finally arrives, you will have led the most delayed presidential transition for any OMB in history. Despite your shortcomings at OMB, you fashion yourself the acting head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. You have been very busy there, but so far your biggest achievement has been increasing at least 45 million Americans' credit card bills by hundreds of dollars annually by reinstating predatory fees. You have ignored requests from this Congress for information. You stood up the Republican leadership of this committee, several of whom are here today. And you have mocked the Government Accountability Office for affirming what everyone in this room understands to be true. You are unlawfully impounding or stealing congressionally appropriated funds. Director Vought, the Constitution confers the power of the purse, the power to make appropriations in law, to the Congress. It is right there. It's Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. The courts have repeatedly ruled that there is no inherent authority for the president to impound funds. The late Justice Antonin Scalia, not a liberal torchbearer, proudly proclaimed, as much in reference to the Supreme Court's decision in Train versus City of New York. Justice Kavanaugh, then for the D.C. Circuit, wrote, and I quote, even the president does not have unilateral authority to refuse to spend. And Chief Justice Roberts, during his time at the White House counsel's office, stated, and I quote, no area seems more clearly the province of Congress than the power of the purse. Let me just go back to our founding fathers on the Congress's power of the purse, to Alexander Hamilton. And I quote, "Where the purse is lodged in one branch and the sword in another, there can be no danger." You are not just on thin legal footing, Director Vought. You are living in a legal and historical fiction. You envision a king unbound by laws who rules by decree, who accepts lavish gifts from foreign governments, who fills public offices with ultra-wealthy and political allies, and who expels opposition and crushes dissent. This view of presidential authority could not be more un-American and more dangerous to our constitutional order. You contend that there are over 200 years of historical practice to support your position. This is a lie and fiction. I have reviewed your pseudo-history, and nearly every instance you claim supports your position of a president king, unbound by the American system of checks and balances, is either irrelevant or an exercise of discretion explicitly granted by the Congress in law. Presidential impoundment power is a myth. You do not just have to take my word for it. The Constitution, the courts, Government Accountability Office, and the American history would tell us you are breaking the law. Through the OMB funding freeze, which touched communities nationwide, you have attempted to seize control of the government and impound funds far beyond what is permitted by law. And in venues across the country, the courts have broadly, unequivocally told you, quote, "No, you do not have the authority. You cannot unfreeze unilaterally funding across the government that has been appropriated by the Congress." The courts are making clear that you grossly overstepped your authority. You have had your day in court, and the courts have rebuked you. They have said no, no, and no. None of this is surprising. Project 2025, which you co-authored, laid out your blueprint for concentrating absolute power, not just in the White House, but in your own hands. Your colleagues, secretaries, and heads of major agencies have testified before us in the last several weeks to exactly this point. Your office has promoted your own goals over and above the people President Trump has handpicked to run his administration. You have also said that you want to traumatize federal employees, civil servants, as if inflicting trauma and creating a culture of fear and doubt will somehow make this government more efficient. Mr. Vought, be honest. This is never about government efficiency. In fact, an efficient government, a government that capably serves the American people and proves good government is achievable, is what you fear the most. You want a government so broken, so dysfunctional, so starved of resources, so full of incompetent political lackeys and bereft of experts and professionals that its departments and agencies cannot feasibly achieve the goals and the missions to which they are lawfully directed. Your goal is privatization, for the biggest companies to have unchecked power, for an economy that does not work for the middle class, for working and vulnerable families. You want the American people to have no one to turn to but to the billionaires and the corporation this administration has put in charge. Waste, fraud, and abuse are not the targets of this administration. They are your primary objectives.
After watching Rosa DeLauro completely undress Russell Vought here, it's very clear that Donald Trump and Russell Vought really don't want the American people to know what it is they're doing because they're con men. Their arguments are completely fraudulent, as Rosa DeLauro pointed out there. That's why Donald Trump, when he was asked about Project 2025 on the campaign trail, said he knew nothing about it, and then once he won the presidency, turned around and put Russell Vought in as the head of the Office of Management and Budget. They've even gone so far as to remove the website which showed where those funds were going across the federal government, something that Rosa DeLauro took issue with during her line of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just very quickly, we really do not have a budget. What you sent covers this year. There's not no 10-year budget. There really isn't any vision for the future at all of what you've sent up. Director Vought, after an appropriation is enacted, the first thing that happens is before an agency can deliver the promises to the American people is OMB has to make funding available through a legally binding decision known as an apportionment. In essence, you are the first and sometimes biggest bureaucratic hurdle that stands between American taxpayers and the services, support, and protections they have promised in spending laws. And for over 100 years, apportionments were secret. reiterate, these decisions were effectively laws that you and your also unelected predecessors made whenever you liked without accountability or transparency. I fought on a bipartisan basis, bicameral basis, alongside members of this subcommittee for 4 years to change that. We enacted simple transparency requirements because this committee and the Congress need information to effectively legislate. Independent watchdog organizations deserve the information to help the American public understand how your decisions affect their lives. 3, most importantly, the American taxpayers are entitled to see how you, your predecessors, and every OMB director, how you are spending their money. My question is, you do not think, Director Vought, that Congress deserves to know how you carry out the laws that we enact. You do not believe that American taxpayers deserve to see how you spend their money, do you?
No, I don't think that characterization is true. We do. It's one of the reasons why we come up to the Hill and testify, and we explain our decisions. We believe that apportionments are legally binding, but not final agency actions, and that it is part of a pre-decisional deliberative process on behalf of the executive branch to be able to manage agencies and the programs therein. And what we found in the last 4 years in which the law that you worked hard to put into place that we have constitutional concerns about is that it actually degraded the oversight responsibilities that OMB had, in that we would the people would actually change.
Excuse me, Mr. Director, because my time is running out. You know, in all fairness, I had this debate and discussion. I'm not just having it with you. I had a debate and discussion on this with your predecessor and others with the same argument and so forth. The American people, the Congress who legislate and enacts the laws, has to have the ability to understand what you're spending, how you're doing it, at what intervals, and so forth. And also, let me just say, this requirement, as I say, was debated for 4 years, including with you specifically during your prior tenure as OMB director. Your predecessor did comply with the law for over 2 years, and you followed this law for 2 months. What happened? Why did the website come down? Why do we not know what is happening? Why are we going back to those days of secret decisions being made by you and whomever else in terms of the spending of the dollars that we constitutionally enact here when we put these bills into law with congressionally directed resources that serve the American people? Tell me what happened. Why did you change what you were doing for 2 months or what your predecessor was doing over the last couple of years?
Well, we had constitutional concerns with the provision. We had a veto threat against this provision in the first term. If it was presented while the president was still in office, I expect you would have had a signing statement that said, not unlike our letter to the committee, not unlike the DOJ's letter to the committee, we have constitutional concerns with it. And it's something that degraded our ability to manage taxpayer resources and do the very
We passed a law, and with all due respect, again, I think the level of your honesty on your claims really shines through on this topic, and there probably isn't much more point in discussing it, but that goes at the very fact you make up constitutional issues where the Constitution places that power of the purse within this body and within an appropriations committee. Historically, it is there, but you make a decision as to what you want to do, what you think is Constitution or not Constitution without any basis in fact, thereby pulling down that website that allows us to see what you are doing. We have no way of knowing if you are carrying out what we have lawfully required the executive branch to do. That is our responsibility, and your responsibility is to carry out what it is that we have appropriated here. You just can't pick and choose whatever the hell you want and going forward, if it says, and I yield back the balance of my time.
It is absolutely insane that Russell Vought and Donald Trump think they're justified in their actions when they don't even want the American people to see it. Donald Trump says he knows nothing about Project 2025 because he knows that the American people don't agree with the dismantling of our federal government, and picking and choosing which agencies get funding depending on who's nice to Donald Trump and maybe what states those agencies will help, whether or not they're red or blue. Donald Trump is not the king, and Rosa DeLauro made that very clear. So this is kind of a double-edged sword for me, because moments like this really give me hope that the American people will see this, they'll see what they're doing, and we'll fix it in the midterms and in the next election. But at the same time, Russell Vought and Donald Trump, they want to be the kings. And that's something that is going to take a lot of resistance to fight against.